Welcome to Unleashed at Work and Home, the show dedicated to helping veterinarians, vet techs, dog trainers, shelter and rescue workers, pet sitters, and all the other animal crazy pet professionals manage their stress and find more joy. I'm your host, Colleen Pilar, and I'm thrilled you're here with us today. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on your favorite app so that you won't miss a single episode. This episode is brought to you by our free community, the Circle of Resilient and Thriving Pet Professionals. If you like the ideas shared here, then you're invited to continue the conversation with other lifelong learners in the community. You can find out more at colleenpilar.com. It's the perfect place for you to learn cool stuff, feel good, and take action to create the life you love. Come join us. Welcome back to Unleashed at Work and Home. My guest today is Laura Gendron. She's the owner and founder of Misbehavior in New Hampshire. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're going to be talking about trust today. And I think trust is a really tricky topic because there are so many layers to it and what all becomes involved in knowing that you can trust someone else, knowing that you can trust yourself. What does it really mean? So why don't we just sort of start with, if somebody said, well, what does trust mean to you? What does trust mean to you, Laura?
Growing up, I definitely had a lot of walls up around me. I definitely had a lot of armor, I guess you could say. So that has been an ongoing theme in my whole life. And I am married now and I have 2 kids. And with that, I definitely have had to put some of that armor down and let some of those walls go a little bit. So over the last my kids are 6 and 8 now. So I guess over the last 8 years, but really, I would say just the last couple of years, I've really been digging into more self-awareness type stuff. I love psychology. Psychology is my happy place. I love animals. Obviously, that's why I'm in with animals. That's why I work with dogs. I love them, but I also love psychology. So bringing it together has been awesome. And with that, I have done a lot of work with understanding behavior. And when it comes to dog behavior, I know a lot of stuff there, but then being able to apply that to human stuff has been awesome. So the more I dig in and the more self-aware I've become over time, the more I've been able to understand what trust is. And for me, that whole, I don't know if you guys have heard of Brene Brown, maybe, and her whole trust talk that she does, but she talks about a marble jar, and that totally resonated with me. So this idea of like building trust in little pieces, little bits at a time, and like putting marbles in the jar. And, the more marbles you have in the jar, the more you can trust that person that put them there or any of that stuff. So I use that analogy a lot when it comes to my dog people also. So that definitely resonates with me quite a bit.
Yeah, Brene Brown's marble jar was funny the first time I heard her talking about that, because it just threw me right back to a dog training conference where someone had been talking about the piggy bank. And, all of the times that you do something that is comfortable and nurturing and helps the dog be set up for success, you're putting a deposit in the bank. And then there will be these times that it's stressful and things are hard, and that's taking deposits out. It's withdrawals, and that withdrawals tend to be larger. You need lots of tiny little deposits to make up for each of these withdrawals. So I think these ideas are really nice for people because the metaphor gives you something to visualize, to see, it's little things over time. And trust is a tricky one, particularly, I think, for a lot of pet professionals. Many of them I've found have trauma in their background and have had reasons to feel less trusting of humans and more trusting of animals. And so they sort of develop this armor, as you called it, to protect themselves. It can be scary to be open and vulnerable. And so when we're looking at that, when we're looking at creating our marble jars or our piggy banks, what do you think is the most important thing for us to keep in mind when we decide, okay, now I'm going to start really trying to feel a little bit more trusting? How do people start?
So I think, honestly, I think it's those little baby steps. You're talking about the deposits, like with the marble jar or the money. And I think it's just putting little deposits in all the time. So you're always, kind of feeling like you're in the green or that you're rich in those deposits as we talk about them with the dogs. So just those little bits, like just paying, like if you're thinking about your dogs, for example, and, if they are looking for attention from you, and if you turn towards them and give them some attention, even if we maybe shouldn't be at that very moment because maybe they're barking at us for attention, but we just built up trust with them, right? So I think it's the same way with people, where if somebody's talking to us and you just turn and you look at them, as opposed to, continuing to type away on the computer or, looking down at your notebook and writing your notes. Or if you're doing virtual training, I do a lot of virtual training, and I have to, even through the computer, I have to look at them. And, even some simple things as small as looking into the webcam, right? Yeah. Like you're talking to them over the computer, how much eye contact can you make? If they're looking through on the other side and you're looking down because you're looking at them through the computer. I mean, I find that sounds like such a silly thing, but looking into the camera itself, so they feel like they're being looked at and not that you're looking away or getting distracted or looking over your phone. So I think it's those little moments that really build up the trust over time. And sometimes you can look back and you don't even realize, like, well, wait, what was it? Why do I trust her so much? But all of a sudden you just do. And you're like, she's my go-to person. Like if I have an issue with something, this is who I'm going to talk to about it. So I think it happens sort of out of nowhere.
Yeah. Are you familiar with John Gottman's work about bid and response and relationships?
Yes.
It's really interesting, that whole theory of when someone makes a bid for connection, how we respond. And you summed that up so beautifully with the dog. When the dog is barking and you pay attention, or the dog is seeking your attention in whatever way, whether it's a way you'd like to reinforce or not, when you pay attention, you have responded to that bid for attention. And the ratios of how often somebody makes an outreach and then has that responded to matter so much for trust. They have, in the Gottman Institute, they have the 5 magic hours for couples. And I have a graphic about that I'll throw into the show notes. But it's really an interesting thing because it's really just based on when I try to make a connection with you, you notice and respond. And so often people feel unheard. And feeling unheard makes you not trust people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whenever I think about, because like I said, I have a couple of kids too, and just little things like, they want to show me the work. So they've been virtually schooling since March, essentially, other than summer, I guess. And, if I'm trying to get work done on my computer and they just come in the room to try to show me something, after a while, it's kind of like, okay, you don't have to show me every little thing. And of course, that's what you're thinking in your head. And it's so easy to feel frustrated by that, or, just annoyed that they just keep coming in. They keep coming in. I'm just trying to focus. But every time I turn and pay attention to them and make an effort to say, like, oh, you did a really great job. Or even though I might be thinking like, I need to get back to my work. But if I take that moment of time to actually acknowledge what they did, I mean, they light up from it every single time. It's crazy. So it's just, taking all of those little pieces. And it just, I think, makes a huge difference. But it's so easy to get lost in that, like, okay, but I'm trying to get this stuff done and it's very real. I mean, like we still have to live this life. I mean, we didn't expect our kids to be home all the time, right? And our dogs to be, needing us all the time. Because I'm finding that the more often people have been home with their dogs, the more they need us there, right? Like the more they're seeking our attention, it's not satiating them in any way.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The whole idea of being heard, I think, really matters. I noticed that a lot when I was training, that sometimes if a client would start to tell a story and my brain could just jump to the end, I knew the whole story. Like I could tell where we were going.
Yep.
If I didn't let them get their story out, it would just keep coming up. And I learned to just like say it back to say, so what I'm hearing is you're really struggling with this problem and that's causing these issues related. And then the person could go, oh, oh, okay, you heard me. And then they could hear me with whatever I advised. But if I jumped in too soon, if I was like, yep, got it. Okay, we're dealing with this. They weren't there. And that is a piece of trust. That's a piece of establishing yourself as the professional. You, in theory, are trusted because they hired you, but you're not. Until you make a human connection, people don't trust you. And you have to build that first. So you had mentioned that being very fascinated by psychology, just like I am, and by animals, just like I am, and by people, just like I am. So two behavior nerds together having a conversation. Tell me, what are some of your best tips for creating trust with short-term relationships, like a client relationship, as opposed to something longer or deeper?
So I work at a veterinary office part-time. I've worked there since, oh gosh, I can't even think, 2011, however many years ago that was. And I see a lot of clients there, very short-term. And, over the years, our relationships built up, but I'm not there full-time. So I don't get to know them the same way that a lot of the full-timers get to know the clients. And I think just when I see them, if I make a mental note to acknowledge, we'll write little notes sometimes in the client notepads on the computer of like what their kids' names were, or, if they tell us a story, sometimes we'll write a little something in there, just like these little things. And, they don't know necessarily that we're sometimes having to trigger our own memories that way. But I think just acknowledging them in ways like that too. And, I think the full-timers who are there, they know all of that by, they know it all. But I think, just taking the extra step and the extra effort to really do something like that. And some people are going to be better at this naturally than others. I think I'm definitely one of those people that, if I see somebody in the grocery store and they don't have their dog with them, I'm like, hold on, I have to picture them with their dog in order to put their name to it. So I know all their dogs' names, but sometimes it's hard to remember their name without their dog because they've identified that way. So I think just, if I do see somebody in the grocery store, actually now it's a little harder with our masks on, right? But I think just acknowledging them and saying hi to them, because I've definitely have had moments where I'm like, oh, wait, I know that person. I know that person. I know that person. And maybe I do know who it is. And it's kind of like, okay, I can either avoid it or I can just go ahead and be the first one to say hello. So something as simple as that. And again, making eye contact with them. When I'm in the room and I'm listening to stories, I think treating everybody like they are the only person is really important to me. Because I think it's really easy, especially in the veterinary field. And I think when compassion fatigue comes into it, I think it's really easy to say like, okay, well, I just talked to 5 other people about needing to put their dogs on a diet, but the 5 other people dismissed me. So what happens when person number 6 comes in? Right. You just don't talk to them? Or, if you're feeling that compassion fatigue, like, this person's not going to listen now. Well, this is a different person. This isn't that last person. So I think that part's really important too, is just treating everybody like they're individuals, because they are. And, they might need to hear things 7 times before finally it clicks. So I think that part's really important, is just seeing everybody as the individual that they are and not as the whole. So I find that that's a big part of building trust with me, short-term or long-term too.
Mm-hmm. What helps you remind yourself of that when you're having what to you is the same conversation over and over, but isn't, obviously, because it's a different client on the other side? So when you're like, oh, here we go again, how do you prevent yourself from falling into that rut?
So I try to keep stories in mind. So I like to live by stories too. I like to kind of remember like, oh, well, this time I talked to this person and it wasn't resonating, wasn't clicking, but all of a sudden it did. And kind of having that in my mind to keep me motivated to keep going with it. And, I've had people who will email me back. I might send out an email that I think is just like a silly little rant about something, or a silly email about, nothing. And it's giving them permission to feel something. And I'll get an email back and they're like, oh, I so needed to hear this today. Yeah. But maybe yesterday, maybe it wouldn't have hit home the same way. So little things like that, I just think it's just so important, because you never know where people are at with their, their own triggers stacking, like we talk about with the pets, is, like you don't know what their day was like. You don't know what's going on in their life. So I think it's really important to just keep putting it out there, even though it gets very difficult at times when you're like, from the training perspective, as opposed to the veterinary perspective. Even from the training perspective, it's hard for me to sometimes be like, okay, well, if I have to, talk to one more person about not using this tool on their dog because it's going to do this, this, and this, but maybe that person has not heard that before, or just hasn't heard it from me before. That's important too, I think, is sometimes they need to hear it from you.
Yeah.
In particular.
Yeah. And sometimes we need to hear things multiple times and have some time to roll it around in our head. So in the moment when someone's talking to us, we're like, I don't really know if that works for me. I'm not sure that fits. And then later the processing happens and you're like, now I see what she was saying. Now I understand. But the person is no longer there. You don't know the impact you had because the aha moment occurred hours or days or weeks later, when the person had time to really process how the information you shared fit into their life. And that's hard. It's hard because we want the immediate result. We want to know, I told you, you got it. We're good. It will stick with you. You'll always know this because I told you. Right. And that's not how humans learn. Not even close.
No. No.
So what got you interested in diving a little bit more into the human side of things? You said you were sort of interested in developing your own self-awareness and things. What was your triggering event?
So, I mean, COVID was one thing that definitely motivated me to do something different, because I'm not one to just sit still. So being told that I was actually at a dog training conference when we got the news about COVID. I was in Kentucky. So I was, a little ways away, and I had been there for a couple of days already. And I was like, I was really excited for the conference. I was really excited to get out of my mom brain and get into my like trainer brain. And I was there with a friend, and we were going to have, an awesome time learning all this stuff. And then all of a sudden it was canceled, and it was really disappointing. Like I was really upset about it because I was so looking forward to just having that time. And so we ended up flying home a couple of days later, and, the kids' school was done at that point, which of course I didn't know for sure at that point. But so it was either, okay, I can sit still and, do just sort of complain and about this and wallow a little bit, which I might have done for a couple of days. I mean, to be honest, it was kind of like I wanted to go to my conference and this and that. And then other conferences that I had coming up were probably going to be canceled. But of course, again, we didn't know this at the time. So I just took that one step forward. Okay, well, what's that first step? Like I can't go to someone's house right now. Number one, because I have the kids home. So whether I wanted to or not, or whether I felt safe to or not, I didn't have childcare at the time. So, okay, well, what's one thing I can do? So instead of like, what can't I do? Can't do this, can't do that. What can I do? Right? Just like we talk to our clients about, like, well, what's one thing that your dog can do is, knows how to do, or what can you teach them? So it's kind of the same thing. So I ended up learning about how to Zoom. I mean, at that point, I had no clue. I had never used Zoom before. And then instead of just learning how to Zoom, I decided to teach other people what I learned about how to Zoom. So then, and then it was like that one step forward at a time. So it wasn't necessarily, I can't even identify one big event. And I think that's a really important piece too, is sometimes it doesn't have to be that one triggering event. Just like with our pets or with our clients. Like, it's not that something, they don't have to, hit rock bottom with something, but if they take that one step forward and then one more step ahead of that and one more step ahead of that, all of a sudden they've got some good momentum going. And that's essentially what happened. Is I just did little pieces at a time. So I was learning Zoom, and then I was, doing Zoom just with my clients that I knew. And then I was making a little video, and, pre-COVID. So I would say, back in January, February, not that I wouldn't go on camera, I would, but not to an audience that I couldn't see. So going live on videos and making videos and putting them out there, pitching myself to a podcast, going on TV. I ended up going on a TV segment because I just hit the right person at the right time. And all that stuff just all of a sudden happened. And if I look back, I was like, well, how exactly did that stuff happen? I'm not sure, but it was like that one step and then another and then another. And then I got the momentum behind me. And now all of a sudden I'm doing very different things now than I was doing back in January or February. So it's crazy how that can happen, right?
It is. Yeah. And to tie it back to trust, that develops a real strong trust in yourself.
Yes.
And that is such a powerful thing to really know that you've got your own back. Like you're in your corner and you know you can count on you and you're going to do the things to show up for yourself. If somebody said to you that they wanted to develop greater trust in themselves, you've just shared all the ways of, taking the baby steps and just sort of doing the next thing, not having to do the whole thing, but just each little piece. But what kind of thought or encouragement could you provide to them along the way when they start going, it's too hard?
For me, I think what I ended up breaking it down to is like, what are my reinforcers? Like if I was being completely real and honest with myself, I needed some sort of reinforcement for even trying this. So, was it money? Was it feeling valued by people? Was it somebody saying thank you? Was it feeling like I physically helped somebody do something with their dog? So what was my reinforcer? And for me, it was somebody turning around and saying like, that was really helpful. Like you really did something that, I found very valuable. So, but to bring that to like a very practical point, what I ended up doing was basically putting out maybe like a Facebook post or an email or something like that. Would you be interested to learn about this? If so, I'm going to do this Zoom webinar or a masterclass or whatever you choose to call it. And so I would schedule it. I would have people sign up for it. And I kept it really, really cost effective or sometimes free initially. And essentially, I was then I don't want to say stuck, but I was like making a promise to myself and other people. So by letting other people hold me accountable, I was therefore able to hold myself accountable because I wasn't I don't like to let people down. I'm a bit of a people pleaser at times. So I like to make sure that if I promise somebody of something, I'm going to follow through with it. I'm going to do it. So just doing something like that made a huge difference for me. So then that led me to, all of a sudden having all these webinars, and now I have courses and I have, all kinds of things that have been created out of this. So I think just sort of promising things to other people for me was a nice external reinforcement. And I think that I needed that to just kind of take those initial steps. And then, with listening to some of my clients too, I found other services that I never would have thought to offer, like taking somebody's puppy into my house during this and letting my kids help me train. Like it's just something that never would have entered my mind. So by listening to them, I was able to now make these new promises to them that I was now going to have to follow through with. So I think some people are externally motivated, just like our dogs, right? If it's something that you don't naturally want to do, then maybe you need some of that external reinforcement, external motivation. If it's something that you truly enjoy doing, maybe you don't need that. I mean, I think it depends on the people and sort of what gets them to take that first step. And then creating habits too. That was a huge thing for me, is just like creating that habit of, before I even, and this might be extreme, but before I even take a sip of my coffee in the morning, I'm just going to write like one email and just kind of making promises to myself that way too. But again, it was a bit of an external motivator or reinforcement for me, is that like, okay, once I do this, then I can have that, and it worked.
Yeah. And I think that's a really powerful way of thinking about it because, well, first off, so many of us are people pleasers that to commit to someone else and say, I'm going to do this means we're going to do this. And so if we can figure out what would be valuable to ourselves and then commit that publicly to someone else. Like where you said, I'm going to teach this course or I'm going to share this information. That was something that mattered to you. So it was powerful, but there was no time frame on it until you told somebody else. And I'm going to do it on this day at this time. You want to do it with me? And that's really powerful. And recognizing that both the internal and the external rewards can vary, and they can be played with as variables, so like you saying, I'm not going to have a sip of my coffee until I have written this email. That is something that you are in control of. And the only one who knows whether you hold yourself to that or not is you. And yet it's still really effective. And you can have this. And then over time, that won't be so necessary for you because you'll become more and more reinforced by the fact, like, I just get up and send emails. And that will then become an internal reward, which is also amazing and wonderful and probably our long-term goal. But for most of us, we can't start there. I mean, I sure can't start there. And so recognizing that, because I think we sometimes beat ourselves up for not, why am I not better at doing the hard things? Well, because the hard things are hard.
Right.
And because they're hard, sometimes it's really helpful to look for some of those ways of setting yourself up for success and breaking things down into small pieces and deciding, what is my reinforcer? What do I get if I do something hard in support of myself? And that piece is, I think, sometimes challenging for people who are really tired and really run down. Like I don't have enough bandwidth left to take care of me. And I agree. Yeah, I should, but I can't. But they're often using external rewards for other things as a relief, like, oh, I'm going to do this or do that. And it can be a nice little twist on it to just say, yes, I still get to have that and it's still valuable to me. And I just have to do this one small thing first and getting the size right on that so that it's not too big. We just give up and get discouraged.
Right, exactly.
So from a trust point of view as a parent, what is a lesson you would like your kids to understand about trust?
My kids have been spending a lot of time together and it's a boy and a girl. So brother and sister. And so they were bickering, I guess you could call it, a lot in the beginning. And so we ended up having to find something that they could really bond over, and just kind of have that back and forth time, and they can like go play on the trampoline. They just went out today, actually, even though it's really cold. I think it is. They went out and played on the trampoline just to talk about Minecraft. So we ended up getting them into just this external thing. And it was just like a game that they could bond over. It was Mario, and now it's turned into Minecraft. But I think being able to sort of build up that, like, it's not all about my needs versus it's not all about your needs. It's like, okay, well, if like they exchanged remote controls the other day, which I never would have expected them to do. And I just happened to overhear it. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, if I'm there and they know I'm there, they might, my daughter might do something extra nice, for example, towards my son, because she's looking for me to give her some of that external, that praise, or that like, oh, that was really nice. But to hear them doing that when they didn't even know I was there, I thought was awesome. So I think the fact that they've been able to bond over something was really helpful. And I think that that's a lesson that I definitely want them to stick with, is being able to like sort of look outside yourself and what's interesting to you, what you want to be doing, what's in it for you when it comes to anything in life. But what about the other person? Can you think about the other person for a minute and what might be helpful for them or what might be interesting to them, and maybe, reach out that way? Because my daughter wanted nothing to do with Mario in the very beginning, but she put a little extra effort in to asking her younger brother, so she's the older one, asking him a couple questions about Mario here and there. Before you know it, they're playing Mario together in the bedroom. And it's just, again, it just keeps coming back down to those like little building blocks, those little moments, those small marbles, those, little deposits that that we put in the bank and all that sort of stuff. And now they're, they're very bonded over, granted they're video games, both of them. So there's some prize to it in that, but the fact that they're both working together with, whether it's Minecraft or Mario or whatever it is, and they're drawing pictures of Minecraft, and now she's teaching him how to draw pictures of Mario or pictures of Minecraft. They're writing books together. But again, it was because they bonded over something that seems like it shouldn't be that big of a deal. It shouldn't play into it, but it did. I mean, it was a huge thing. Otherwise, had that not happened and they just kept bickering, I don't know where we'd be right now. We'd be going a little bit more crazy. So I think helping them find that place, helping them get to that place where they can really kind of connect to each other. I think that's really important for teaching them that life lesson of finding a way to connect with other people when it's not just about your needs or what you're going to get out of it directly.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And when you were talking, it was bringing to mind my own sons who are all adult, and they live in 3 different states. And I was talking to one the other day and I said something and he was like, yeah, I already know that. And I was like, oh, okay, about another son. And he said, yeah, well, we're playing video games online. And so we talk sometimes. And the mother's heart in me was just like cheering, like, yeah. Because they're not really guys who are going to pick up the phone and call each other, but they can spend an hour or 2 hours playing a video game together where they'll just sort of chat and they knew things about just each other's lives and just ordinary events. And it is related to that trust piece. It is that relationship being contextual and having multiple entries into the marble jar. And video games, which have never been my favorite thing, right? Is the thing that is keeping my 3 adult sons in communication with one another. So I love video games. I don't want to play them, but I love them. I'm grateful they exist.
Yes, so true. Yeah.
So this has been an interesting conversation. We've kind of wandered all around, which always happens in my podcast because I think everything is related to everything. And you seem like a person who also sees lots of ties between things. I think the whole idea of really learning to trust yourself is one piece I'd really like people to take away from this. And you have had a year of sort of explosive growth with learning to trust yourself. Can you tell me, if you looked back on you in January, what would you today like to tell yourself back then, to just give her a little bit of encouragement or support to just say, you will not believe what is ahead?
Just look at the small moments, like those small wins that you get every day. I think thinking back, like if you get to the end of the day, for example, and you think back and you're like, okay, well, what's one small win that I had today? At the end, at dinner, when we have dinner together, typically, most nights, my kids like to do that. What was your high? What was your low? I think that's a really great idea for people to do in general. I don't know that you have to do the lows, but let's stick to the highs. Let's stick to the, what was your high part today? And I think if you can look at that every day, but look at it, get really close to it. So don't look at it in a broad way. Like I'm really happy that my kids are healthy or that my kids got along. It's like, no, look, like take a magnifying glass to that and get closer to it. And what specifically were you really happy about today? Like what moment of time made you really happy? So like, for example, that my daughter, she offered her video game controller to her brother because his was dying and she could kind of get past that and that was fine. So that might be a small little moment. So I think looking at those tiny little moments, and there are certainly days, I'm not going to make it seem like that I do that all the time. There's certainly days that I forget to do that because it just might have been one of those days where, extra hungry. I need to get to the grocery store. The birds are squawking a little extra loud. There's a lot going on. Everybody needs everything at the same time, and I'm overwhelmed, and that is totally normal also. But I think if you can at least get into the habit of at some point in your day, just looking back over, the last 24 hours or so and just zero in on just one small piece. If you can start with just one small piece, I think that you'll be able to see more and more of that. And you know what? I'm not a great journaler. I don't really like to keep track of my journals and where everything is. But if you can write that down, I find that is really helpful for me too. And when I can actually take the time to write it down, even if it's on a sticky note. I mean, my house is covered in sticky notes. I might never find that sticky note again. I can't promise that, but just getting it out of my head and onto something makes it very real. And I find that has been really helpful. So that's definitely something I would recommend to myself back in January.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're right about that. Even if you write it on a sticky note and you never see that paper again, you have strengthened the memory in your head of the event. So it's really powerful in a way that seems sort of silly to people when you say like, oh, write it down. They're like, I don't want to have a journal. I don't want to. But the act of writing it down helps to cement it in your brain. And I love the specificity that you encourage. And that's something I very much agree with, that it isn't the big concepts that make a difference in our life. Like, oh, I'm so happy for my family. No.
Right.
I am so happy for that moment when my daughter shared her controller with her brother. That moment, I'm so happy for my family.
Right.
But it's a snapshot of a moment that you can feel. You don't feel the broad categories the same way as you feel the micro moments, and you go, that was incredible. And I'm so proud of you. And it makes me so happy to see that. That was really lovely. So that was wonderful. Thanks so much for joining me today to talk about trust. If people wanted to learn more about you and your work, how could they do that?
So my main website is misbehaviortraining.com, 2 S's in miss, like the person. I am also on Facebook and I'm on Instagram, both under Misbehavior Training. So pretty easy to find. And I'm on there all the time. And I love when people reach out to me and just say hi, make a relationship from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Unleashed at Work and Home. I invite you to come learn more at colleenpilar.com, where you can be steady, be strong, and be long.